I'm going to chair the last session. It's an honor to have this responsibility for this fabulous conference that we've been honored to be at for the past 2 days. So, clinical research. My title is Dream Big, Design Well, all in service to your patients. And by dream big, I'm making a pitch for, as has been reiterated time and again, larger data sets, national and international collaborations. So Paul has proposed himself as the hub of the wheel that we're going to create today, which is very exciting. Our esteemed panel, Joe is going to speak about patient-related outcome measures. Charlie's going to speak about data registries. And Steve Coleman from Australia is going to end up with the Australian perspective of clinical research. And so this kind of just struck me, given my personal experience from the bench to the bedside translational work. There's no elevator to success. You have to take the stairs. None of us in this room are afraid of the stairs. Maybe the younger people have stronger legs, and that's great. But the challenge is there for us to take up. And again, this is just relating to personal experience. When Dr. Hurst and I started our collagenase journey, we were kind of pointed at as, you guys are absolutely crazy. You know, what kind of an idea is that? You know, you're just thinking too far outside of the box and you're gonna fall off a ledge. And at worst, you're gonna do this to someone's finger. But with hard work and persistence, our journey ended well. So the journeys that you take up on the basis of what has been presented for the past 2 days, last 5 years at Charlie's Symposium, the great literature that's always coming out, we need to coalesce and work together. So, design well. In clinical research, although we like to talk about, you know, maybe years of development of what we've done, the major part of what you do in clinical research is at this stage when you start. Build your team, and this is what I mean. If you're going to collaborate nationally, internationally, there's got to be a boss or 1 or 2 bosses as principal investigators, your associate investigators, your study coordinators, staff, and taking the patients into account in clinical research. How easy is it for them to get to your facility, and then when the data is collected, who's responsible for coalescing it, who's responsible for analyzing it, who's responsible for verifying it? That's incredibly, incredibly, incredibly important in clinical research, especially with large data sets. So when we see papers in the literature, and not to demean them, but when you see something written about maybe 10 or 15 patients and the conclusion of the paper says, well, there was a trend, but no statistical significance, how does that help you as clinicians? It doesn't. I mean, it may generate an idea for you here and there, but is it going to change the way you practice? I don't think so. In trials, safety is king. It truly, honestly is. Safety is king. The patients have to be safely monitored. So in our trials, in our development over those many years of collagenase, we were visited every 6 weeks by a safety monitor. And they're not very pleasant visits in that, you know, your paperwork is constantly, and now the computer-generated data is constantly monitored. given that they're not pleasant, they are essential. They're absolutely essential. And the study monitors do a great job of that. So my bent is going to be from the American perspective. How do we get clinical research funded? We have to think first small and then a little bit larger, okay? So in our country, the sources of funding are the National Institutes of Health and even the FDA. And I'm just putting an example of what a small NIH grant program is in the United States, direct cost of about $50,000 US. So what Dr. Hurst and I did was try to think of methods of interesting the funding agencies in a sequential fashion. So our pilot studies were with the Food and Drug Administration and the NIH. Once you have a data set, you get persistent, get on the phone, learn who the study section heads are, the members of the study section, and you can even, do a little bit of ethical lobbying in the pilot stage. And then, even in this stage, we had a little bit of industry funding, not a lot, but that's another source. So in the larger picture, the larger data sets, in the United States, there are a host of these grant programs, okay? And the FDA probably should be added. So for any Americans in the audience, and I've spoken to Latha, you can convince them without an animal model, and we're examples of having done that, to fund you in pilot and small. If you have a therapeutic target and you can potentially demonstrate to them that you're going to develop an interventional therapy that helps patients. It's called clinical research. So I won't go through these, but these are larger grants by our government in the States. Also industry sources. Now this isn't a very happy graph of what's happening in the United States, and it's fairly old. So the total NIH budget, you see down here in the red line, it's only about a third of what is spent in the States. That's private and public R&D spending. The rest is pharma. They are the deep pockets. So again, if you can combine funding sources, convince the funding agencies, the government, the pharma sources, that you may have an interventional method that actually helps patients, your chances of funding may be a little bit better. And the consortia that you build will also help you in that regard. And I think this is my last slide. As I alluded to, safety. You have to convince the funding sources that whatever you do is going to be expertly and safely done. I know we all think, we're great at what we do, but you have to convince other people who you're asking for money that, yeah, this is the way I'm going to do it. This is how I'm going to do it. This is how I'm going to monitor it, and it's going to be safe. So, for example, stopping rules. If something bad happens, and inevitably, it might not be horrendous, what are you going to do about it? You're going to stop your trial and look at what happened and put yourself on clinical hold if the FDA doesn't do it to you first? And then how are you going to restart? Your safety reviews, as I alluded to before, who's going to do it? It should probably be an independent source doing that for you. And even if you've got, for example, a financial conflict of interest, then you can't be the person doing the intervention in the clinical research. It has to be one of your colleagues. And that's how you keep data clean. and reports to agencies. Government agencies love paperwork, and they routinely ask for it. Funding sources and industry are the same. So with that, I just wanted to throw out a few ideas of sort of our experience, things to think about. It is not insurmountable, because having translated something, it is the best feeling in the world to go from the bench to the bedside and to see patients around the world helped by an idea that was generated in your head. Getting emotional.